I'm standing on Dave Kowalski's front porch at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning holding a USB drive, and Dave is still in his bathrobe and he's looking at me the way people look at someone who just walked through a wall. "You need to see this," I said. He let me in. We sat at his kitchen table. He plugged the drive into his laptop. The footage started playing and neither of us said anything for about 4 minutes. On the screen, a dark blue Audi A6 pulled into my driveway at 10:22 a.m. Parked. A man got out, mid-40s, light jacket, dark jeans, and walked to my front door. Knocked. My wife opened it within 15 seconds. Like she was waiting. He went inside. The timestamp ran. 10:22 became 10:45, became 11:30, became 12:08. At 12:08 the man came back out, got in the Audi, and drove away. My wife stood in the doorway for a moment watching him go. Dave looked at me over the top of his laptop screen. "How many times?" he asked. 11, I said. "In 3 months." He leaned back in his chair and blew out a long breath through his nose. "Okay," he said. "Let's get you a name. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Ray Kowalczyk. I'm 44 years old and I've been a licensed plumbing contractor in Cuyahoga County, Ohio for 19 years. I run a small operation, myself, 2 full-time guys, and a part-time apprentice named Jordan who's fresh out of trade school and still torches his sleeves every other week. We do residential and light commercial. Kitchen and bath remodels, water heater replacements, drain work, the occasional full gut renovation when a general contractor brings us in. It's not a flashy business, but it's mine and it's solid. I gross around $280,000 a year and net about $90,000 after payroll and overhead. I own a 2020 Ram 1500 and a panel van. I coach youth baseball in the spring. Her name is Carla. Carla Kowalczyk, née Bianchi. She's 41. We met at a wedding, mutual friends, open bar. She laughed at something I said and that was it for me. We've been married 15 years. We have 2 kids, Danny, who's 12 and plays travel baseball, and Sophia, who's 9 and currently obsessed with making slime on the kitchen counter. We live in a 4-bedroom colonial in Strongsville. Good neighborhood, good schools, good neighbors. The kind of block where people still wave from driveways. My neighbor directly across the street is a man named Gerald Pappas. Gerald is 67, retired, and he was an electrical engineer for 30 years before his knees gave out and he decided that a pension and a vegetable garden were all a man really needed. He has a Ring floodlight camera mounted above his garage that covers his entire driveway and most of the street. He got it after someone keyed his Buick LeSabre in 2021 and he's been devoted to it ever since. He once showed me the app on his phone and explained, with genuine pride, that the motion sensitivity was set to maximum and the cloud storage went back 90 days. I know this because Gerald and I are friendly. We talk over the fence. He brings over zucchini in August whether you want it or not. He watches my house when we travel. He has my cell number. He called me on a Monday evening in mid-February. I was on a job site in Parma wrapping up a water heater swap when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number at first because Gerald usually texts. I picked up. "Ray," he said. "I've been going back and forth on whether to call you." There was something in his voice. Not urgency. More like the weight of someone who'd made a difficult decision and was already committed to it. "Gerald?" I said. "Everything okay?" He was quiet for 2 seconds. "I think you should come over and look at some footage from my camera," he said. "When you have time." Soon, though. I want to be honest about the weeks before Gerald's call, because things don't come out of nowhere even when they feel like they do. Carla and I had been fine on the surface. Dinner together most nights. Weekend errands. Sophia's school events, Danny's baseball tournaments. The machinery of a family life running the way it's supposed to run. But underneath that there had been a low-grade static for maybe 8 or 9 months that I'd been filing under she's stressed or it's just a phase. She'd become protective of her phone in a way that was new. Not dramatic about it, nothing that would have raised a flag if you were watching from the outside. Just small things. Phone always face down on the counter. Taking it with her when she went to check the mail. Switching from her thumbprint unlocked to a full passcode sometime around last fall. I noticed, but I didn't interrogate it. I'm not the interrogating type. She'd also started going to the gym on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. She'd never been a gym person, that was always more my thing. But she bought new workout clothes in October, signed up for a membership at an LA Fitness on Pearl Road, and started leaving at 9:15 a.m. on those 2 days. Back by noon or 12:30. I thought it was good. I thought she was taking care of herself. I was away 3 or 4 days a week on bigger jobs. Not overnight usually, I'd come home late, sometimes 8 or 9 p.m., but I wasn't around during the day the way I'd been in slower seasons. The kids were at school. The house was hers from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. most days. I noticed she'd started using a different perfume. Not daily, just sometimes. Something I didn't recognize. When I mentioned it, she said she'd gotten samples at the Ulta near the mall. I let it go. Looking back, the static had a frequency. I just hadn't tuned into it yet. Gerald's call tuned me in fast. I went to Gerald's house the following morning at 8 a.m. before my first job. He'd made coffee. He had his laptop open on the kitchen table with the Ring app already pulled up. He didn't make a speech about it. He just turned the laptop toward me and hit play. The footage was from a Tuesday, 3 weeks earlier. My driveway, filmed from across the street at an angle that caught everything clearly. The timestamp in the corner, 10:22 a.m. The dark blue Audi A6 pulled in slowly, like the driver knew exactly where he was going and wasn't in a hurry about it. He parked behind Carla's Honda Pilot. Got out. Medium height, light build, dark hair going gray at the sides, wearing a North Face jacket and dark jeans. He walked to my front door like he'd been there before. Knocked once. The door opened in less than 15 seconds. He was inside for 1 hour and 46 minutes. When he came out at 12:08, he walked with the same unhurried pace back to the Audi. Carla stood in the doorway. He turned back once and she smiled. Gerald let me watch it twice. Then he said, quietly, I've got more. He had 11 separate instances. The earliest dated back to November 12th of last year. Always Tuesdays. Occasionally a Thursday. Always between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. Always the same Audi A6. Parking in my driveway. Going inside. Coming out an hour to 2 hours later. 11 times in 3 months. I sat at Gerald's kitchen table with my hands around a coffee mug I wasn't drinking from anymore, and I looked at the screen and I felt something shift in my chest that wasn't quite anger yet. It was more like the feeling you get when you're working on a system and you find the failure point. Everything that was confusing and inconsistent suddenly makes a single, clear, terrible kind of sense. I asked Gerald if he could put all 11 clips on a USB drive. He'd already prepared one. He slid it across the table without saying anything. I thanked him. He said he was sorry. I believed him. I drove to my first job that morning, a bathroom rough-in in Middleburg Heights, and I worked through it without saying a word to my guys beyond what the job required. My hands did what they needed to do. My brain was somewhere else entirely. On my lunch break, I sat in the Ram in the parking lot of a Subway and I thought about what I needed and what I didn't need. What I didn't need, to walk into my house and start yelling. To send Carla an accusatory text. To call her and ask her to explain the Audi. Any of those moves hands her the initiative. She gets to control the narrative, delete evidence, coordinate a story. I'd seen enough bad outcomes and enough divorces among people I knew to understand that the person who acts impulsively usually loses. What I needed, a name, a professional record, and documentation clean enough to walk into a family law attorney's office with. I texted Dave Kowalski that evening. Different Dave from my childhood, this Dave I'd met through a mutual contact 6 years ago. He does private investigations out of a small office in Lakewood. Mostly insurance work, some domestic. We'd had beers a few times, talked shop. He was competent and discreet. 2 things I needed more than anything else right now. Hey Dave, need to talk professional. Something came up. When can you meet? He responded in 20 minutes. We set up the meeting for the next morning. Which brings me back to his kitchen table, the USB drive, and that 4 minutes of silence while the Audi pulled into my driveway for the 11th time on his laptop screen. Dave had the Audi's plate run by early afternoon. The car was registered to a man named Scott Ferrante. Age 46. Address in Rocky River, about 8 miles from Strongsville. Dave pulled his professional background in about 2 hours through a combination of public records and databases he had access to through his PI license. Scott Ferrante was a commercial real estate broker. He had his own small firm, Ferrante Property Group, LLC, operating out of a shared office space in Westlake. He'd been in commercial real estate for about 18 years. His LinkedIn showed a professional headshot, a list of completed transactions, and 340 connections. His Facebook was partially public. He was married, or had been. His profile showed a woman tagged in older photos, but the most recent tagged photo of them together was from a July 4, 2 years ago. No indication of separation or divorce on the public profile. Dave also found a civil judgment from 2019. A former client had sued Ferrante for breach of fiduciary duty in a commercial lease deal. The case settled out of court. The settlement amount was sealed, but the filing was public. None of that mattered as much to me as one thing Dave said at the end of his summary. He's not divorced, Dave said. His wife's name is Michelle. They have a kid in middle school. I looked at him. So he's doing this too, I said. Looks that way. I sat with that for a minute. 2 families. 4 kids counting mine. One man's driveway on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I told Dave I needed photographs. Timestamped, professional, admissible in a divorce proceeding. The kind that document both individuals arriving and leaving together. He quoted me $800 for a full surveillance session. I didn't negotiate. We set up for the following Tuesday. Dave arrived in Strongsville at 9:30 a.m. and parked 2 houses down from mine in a silver Ford Escape he uses for this kind of work. Tinted rear windows, magnetic license plate covered to obscure the full number from a distance. He had a Canon R6 with a 100 to 400 mm zoom lens and a separate video camera mounted on a small tripod in the back seat. I was at a job in North Olmsted, a full bathroom gut for a homeowner doing a renovation. I had my phone in my chest pocket on silent with notifications on. At 10:17 a.m. Dave texted me, Audi incoming. At 10:19, he's parked. Walking to door now. She opened before he knocked. Photo package started. At 10:21, both inside. I'm in position. I kept working. I handed Jordan a fitting without looking at him. My hands were steady. My stomach was not. Dave texted me again at 12:02, they're coming out together. She walked into the car. He kissed her in the driveway. Got it all. Video and stills. I put my phone back in my pocket. At 12:04, clean shots. Faces, the kiss, her hand on his arm, him getting in the car. She watched him pull out. Smiled and waved. I've got everything you need, Ray. I excused myself to the backyard of the house I was working in and stood there for about 3 minutes looking at nothing in particular. Then I went back inside and finished the job. Dave sent me the full package that evening via a secure file transfer link. 63 photographs. 2 video clips totaling 9 minutes and 40 seconds. A typed summary with timestamps, vehicle information, and Scott Ferrante's full name and address. Professional. Clean. Dated. I backed it up in 3 places: a second USB drive, my Google Drive, and I emailed the summary document to myself from a Gmail account I created that afternoon that Carla didn't know about. Then I called an attorney. Her name was Deborah Wills. She ran a family law practice in Strongsville with 2 associates. She'd been recommended to me by my accountant, who had gone through a difficult divorce 4 years prior, and said Deborah was the attorney you wanted when the other side was going to fight. I sat across from her desk on Wednesday morning with the USB drive, Gerald's 11 clips, Dave's surveillance package, and a legal pad with my own notes, dates, mileage observations, the gym membership timeline, the phone behavior changes. All of it organized chronologically. She reviewed it quietly for about 20 minutes while I sat there. Then she looked up and said, "This is thorough." I said, "I'm a contractor. I document everything." She told me the same thing my gut had already told me: Ohio is no fault, but documentation of the affair could support claims related to dissipation of marital assets if any shared funds were used. She asked me to authorize a forensic accounting review of our joint accounts going back 24 months. I authorized it on the spot. The forensic accountant, a man named Tom Bridges who worked with Deborah regularly, came back to us 10 days later with a finding I hadn't expected. Over a 20-month period, $18,750 had been moved from our joint savings account to a personal account in Carla's name, only at a different bank. The transfers were always under $1,000. Always on Tuesdays or Thursdays. Always on days the Audi had been in my driveway. I looked at that report for a long time. The gym membership on Pearl Road? She'd never actually signed up. I called LA Fitness directly and confirmed there was no account under her name. The $49.99 monthly charge I'd seen on our joint Visa for 5 months had gone to a prepaid Visa gift card she'd purchased at a Walgreens. She'd been paying for the hotel rooms. Not all of them. Apparently Scott Ferrante had his own arrangements sometimes, but at least some of them. My money. My joint account. Funding Tuesday and Thursday afternoons while I was pulling permits and torching copper fittings in other people's houses. Here's the part one want to tell you carefully, because I've thought about it a lot since. I found out through Dave's follow-up work I'd asked him to do one more check, that Scott Ferrante's wife Michelle had no idea any of this was happening. She worked as a dental hygienist in Westlake. She had a 7-year-old son. By all available evidence, she was going about her life completely unaware that her husband was driving his Audi A6 to a house in Strongsville twice a week. I thought about that for 3 days. On the 4th day I made a decision. I'm not the kind of man who calls a stranger's wife to blow up her life. That's not justice, that's just spreading the blast radius. But I also believe that if someone did this to me, I would want to know. Not from a stranger. Not from an anonymous letter. But from someone who had documentation and was telling me out of respect rather than cruelty. I asked Deborah if she had a professional obligation around this. She said she didn't. Her obligation was to me. But she said there was nothing stopping me from making a personal decision. I wrote Michelle Ferrante a letter. 1 page, handwritten. I told her who I was, what I'd found, and that I had documentation available to her if she wanted it. I told her I was sorry to be writing it. I put my cell phone number at the bottom. I mailed it to her home address in Rocky River on a Thursday morning. She called me 11 days later. She was composed. Professional, almost. She asked me 2 questions and I answered them both honestly. She thanked me and hung up. That was the last I heard from her directly. But Dave told me 4 weeks later that Scott Ferrante had retained a divorce attorney. I served Carla the papers on a Thursday evening in March. Deborah had advised me on the timing. The kids were at my mother's. I'd arranged that under the pretext of a last-minute sleepover. I came home from work at 5:30, same as always. Carla was in the kitchen. She was making the pasta she makes when she hasn't planned anything else, rigatoni with Jared sauce and Italian sausage. The kitchen smelled normal. The whole house smelled normal. I set the envelope on the kitchen island. She looked at it. "What's this?" she asked. "Divorce papers," I said. "Deborah Wills is my attorney. Her contact is on the front page." Carla's face went through several things in quick succession. Then it settled into something careful. "Ray. I'm not doing this tonight," I said. I kept my voice level. Not cold, just level. "The kids are at my mom's. I'm going to stay at Mike's for a few days while you get yourself an attorney. There's nothing in here that should surprise you." She started to say something else. I held up one hand. "I have Gerald's footage going back to November. I have GPS. I have surveillance photos. I have the bank transfers, Carla." I paused. "I have everything. So let's just let the attorneys handle it from here." The rigatoni was still on the stove. The sauce was starting to stick to the bottom of the pot. I could hear it. She sat down on a bar stool at the island and put her hands flat on the counter and stared at them. I picked up my overnight bag from the hallway. I'd packed it that morning, and I walked out. I sat in the Ram in the driveway for a minute before I started the engine. The house looked the same from the outside as it always had. 4 bedrooms. Good neighborhood. Driveway that needed resealing. A basketball hoop Danny never used anymore because he'd switched to baseball. I backed out and drove to Mike's. The weeks after were the hardest weeks. Not because of anger, the anger had come and gone earlier, in job site parking lots and in Gerald's kitchen and in the Ram outside a Subway. What the weeks after brought was something more complicated. Grief, partly. Logistics, partly. The specific exhaustion of having to explain to your 12-year-old son and your 9-year-old daughter that their parents were going to be living in different houses without telling them why in a way that damaged them. I told Danny and Sophia together, at my mom's kitchen table, on a Sunday afternoon. I told them it was an adult problem between me and their mom, that it wasn't about them in any way at all, and that both of us loved them completely and that wasn't changing. Sophia cried. Danny didn't. He asked if he could still play travel baseball this spring. I told him absolutely. I'd already registered him. I was still going to coach the younger division. Carla retained an attorney named Paul Hart. Paul Hart apparently reviewed the documentation and advised her that a contested proceeding would be inadvisable given what I'd assembled. I found this out from Deborah, who described the other side as cooperative once they understood the landscape. The dissipation finding, the $18,750 moved out of joint savings, was factored directly into the asset division. Carla got less of the equity on the house because of it. She couldn't argue the math. Tom Bridges' accounting was clean and documented to the penny. The house was listed in April. We split the equity after closing. I got a larger share due to the dissipation offset. I bought a smaller house in the same school district, 3 bedrooms, a garage for the Ram and the panel van, a yard Danny could use if he ever wanted to. The kids stayed on a week-on week-off schedule. Primary address with me. School proximity factored in. Carla's professional life changed too. She had been doing bookkeeping on a part-time contract basis for a small medical group in Strongsville. She'd picked it up 2 years earlier when Sophia started school full-time. When the principals of the medical group, who were also parishioners at our church and knew most of the same people we did, became aware of the general circumstances of the divorce through the community that knows everything, the contract was not renewed in April. I want to be clear, I didn't make calls. I didn't send emails. I didn't campaign. But small communities do their own accounting, and they're thorough. Scott Ferrante's commercial real estate practice absorbed its own damage. A developer he'd been cultivating for a mid-size retail project in Westlake pulled the engagement in May. The reasons given were professional, but the timing was what it was. None of this made me feel victorious. I want to be honest about that. When you watch the scaffolding come down around something that used to be your life, you don't feel like you won anything. You just feel like someone who survived something and is trying to figure out what to build next. The divorce was finalized on June 17th. I know the exact date because it was also Danny's last travel baseball tournament of the spring season, played on a Saturday at a complex in Medina. I signed the final documents at Deborah's office at 9 a.m. and drove directly to Medina and watched Danny go 2-for-3 with a double and a stolen base. On the drive home he asked if I wanted to stop for food and I said yeah, wherever he wanted. He picked the Dairy Queen on Route 82. We sat in a booth and he had a blizzard and I had a cheeseburger and we talked about his swing and whether his team had a shot at regionals. He didn't ask about the divorce. He knew. He was 12 and he understood more than I gave him credit for. He just didn't need to talk about it right then and neither did I. We drove home in the summer evening with the windows down. I'm writing this in September. 6 months out from the papers, 3 months from the finalization. The new house is good. Smaller than what we had, but mine in a way the Colonial never quite felt like after a certain point. The garage is set up the way I want it. The yard needs work, but I've been doing it on weekends and there's something clarifying about that kind of physical work with no deadline and no client. Danny and Sophia are okay. Not perfect, this isn't the kind of thing kids are okay about all at once. But okay in the way that means they're eating dinner and doing homework and coming home on their weeks and laughing at things on TV and being regular kids navigating a thing most of their friends' parents haven't put them through. Sophia made me a card last month that said Best Dad on the front in purple marker with a drawing of 2 people fishing. We don't fish. I'm not sure where that came from. I put it on the refrigerator. Gerald Pappas brought me zucchini from his garden 3 weeks ago. I took all of it. We stood in my new driveway for a while and talked about nothing in particular, and he never once mentioned the phone call or the USB drive or any of it. He's a good man. The Ring floodlight camera above his garage is still there, still on maximum sensitivity, still storing 90 days of footage in the cloud. I told him once that I hoped he never had to use it for anything important again. He said he hoped so too.